Oh,
Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Today we have a very special guest, Jacob Stringa. Welcome to the podcast. And I met Jacob about a month ago at a keratin meditation session, and we hit it off. And I noticed he had a few really interesting ideas and views on different topics like manifestation, spirituality, and meditation, which is also what I'm into. It's also what I love. And so here today, I have Jacob Stringer, who is a transformation coach, breathwork, qigong, hypno, different forms of meditation. Welcome to the podcast.
thanks, Dylan. Nice to be here today. And like you said, yeah, things aligned on that night, and here we are to have a chat and discuss a
Exactly.
few things today. Yeah.
Happy you're here. And what I'm really curious about is like your journey. How did you get into the spiritual rabbit hole? What happened in your life that like really, because I notice everybody that gets it. Well, a lot of people that get into this, they have something really challenging, something difficult, something like some emotion, whether it be like anxiety, fear, guilt, shame. Those are the ones that I dealt with personally. So I'm curious about, was there a moment or was there something that really got you into this today?
Yeah, for sure. There's always a catalyst. There's always, as I say, some of those dark times that help create pressure in our life to make those changes for us to seek a new direction, for us to reflect on ourselves, on the world around us. And for me, many years ago, I was addicted to a lot of drugs. So drugs in particular like meth, cocaine, later on marijuana, smoked cigarettes, alcohol, video games, junk food. I was very overweight. And during those periods, basically suffered with a lot of anxiety, paranoia, vertigo, and panic attacks were some of the main things I experienced. And back then, I always just went to work. I maintained a part-time job that I had at the time. I went to work. I only had enough money to support my habits, to support my smoking, my drinking, and everything that I was, all the types of drugs that I was buying. And I knew I wanted a better life. I knew that, if I was to keep living that way, that in the long run, it's not going to have positive repercussions, on my future, on my family, if I want to have children or if I want to meet someone. Because at the time, like I never really left my area. I always stayed confined to indoor spaces, either in front of a screen, playing games, or at a friend's house. Other than me going to work, it was either me back in the area and staying inside. So I never went outside, never explored the sun or nature. I would often say no to parties and outdoor events. I would avoid any types of nice days or public holidays. I would like to just always stay enclosed. I was always very paranoid and had a lot of anxiety around that. And so the big shift was when I started to really want to make changes, and I got away from the meth and I got away from all those heavier drugs, and I started to smoke more marijuana. And I smoked marijuana every day for about 4 years. And something in me was really wanting to make a change, but it was just so hard. Everyone around me, all my friends, were still smoking. Everyone was playing video games. Everyone was eating unhealthy. It was just a thing that everyone did. So for me to make that change was very, very difficult. And I had times where I really tried, and I tried to get away from the marijuana, and I got really depressed. Lots of emotions was coming up, lots of feelings and sensations that I wasn't used to experiencing were coming up because I was so numb. For a lot of my life, I was very suppressed, distracted, numb, always, constantly feeding myself with drugs or distractions. So when I did step away from that, there were things coming up that I wasn't ready to deal with. And I remember there was a pinnacle night for me when I had a few nights away from the marijuana and I was feeling very depressed, I called a friend and I wanted to like get some support. You know, I didn't know who to reach out to. I just called a friend and he wasn't available that night. So I went walking. It was dark at night, wasn't feeling the best, came back home, and my brother was in the garage and he was, you know, smoking weed. He was still smoking at the time. So I went and had a puff with him. And then that led to my body just reacting from that puff all of a sudden. I don't know if it was because I had a break from the marijuana or if it was that type of weed. But I started to feel like I was having a heart attack at the time. And, you know, I was panicking and, you know, I tried relaxing, I had a shower, nothing worked. And then my mum ended up calling the ambulance because they thought I was having a heart attack, right? Called the ambulance, they said I was just having a panic attack, went to the hospital, you know, spent one night there over at the hospital. They gave me a Valium to relax and I was okay. The next day, I knew that I couldn't really touch marijuana anymore because I was too afraid from that day onwards. And I didn't want that to happen again. So basically that brought up an array of anxiety, constant anxiety, very frequent panic attacks, which were just constant. Paranoia was at a new level. And it was that extreme that I couldn't even go to a friend's house. It was very intense for me to even go to work. I couldn't have a friend at my house. Very, very basic things I couldn't do. Like my whole world corroded on me at that time. So I had to do something. And I remember I went to the doctors with my mum because we didn't know what to do at the time. You know, we don't know about healers or meditation. You know, no one around me was talking about these concepts. So I went to the doctors and the doctors, obviously they advise me to take medication. I got told to go to a psychiatrist as well, and he advised me to take medication. And at the time, I didn't want to. There was something in me just didn't want to take medication. And my mum backed me. She said, you know, you do whatever you want to do. If you don't want to take the medication, you don't. So I didn't. So because I didn't take the medication, I went through a pretty intense period of time of my life. It was very, very intense. And that was when I was basically forced to find something else. And that's where I found meditation. And meditation was a way for me to deal with the anxiety at the time, to actually like bring it down, relax my panic attacks. I was able to at least start going back to work because I was calling in sick a lot. And I was very close to quitting at my job at the time. And so the meditation and everything helped for me to at least get by, right? And the anxiety was a lot less. The panic attacks were dramatically a lot less. And so I started to think, okay, if I was to keep practicing meditation before I had a panic attack, before I felt anxiety, maybe that would help prevent it. So I started to really implement that into my life more. And as I did that, it was like my awareness was expanding. I started to notice my vibration lifting as well. And then new opportunities started coming in because my energy was higher. I started to see the world a little bit differently. I manifested and attracted some new opportunities. I felt a bit better. And I started to read books. I started to get into self-development. And then I was still struggling with the anxiety, still struggling with a lot of fear, and still very stuck in my area. And I remember I was at work and I was very close to basically going to the office and telling them that I need to step down from being part-time. I need to either quit the job or go casual. And I remember I was on the way to that toilet and something said to me, just go to the bathroom. So I did that and did a bit of meditation, calm myself down. So, okay, I'll get through this day. And then that day, one of my friends, because I was speaking to him about my condition and everything, and he was basically recommending a guy in Melbourne, in the city, who's a life coach, a hypnotherapist, and a meditation teacher. I didn't know much about hypnotherapy at the time. And I thought, okay, I'll try this out. So I, called the guy up, organized a session. I went with my mum because at the time I didn't go anywhere without someone holding my hand. And so I went with my mum, and I remember having that first session with him, and he did some meditation, he did some sound healing, he did some hypnotherapy on me. He had this light that gave me like the rays of the sun, like giving me that energy. And yeah, I recorded myself after that session. He told me to kind of do a recording. So I did a recording to myself saying, hey, Jacob, everything's going to be okay. If you're feeling anxious right now or having a panic attack, don't worry, you're going to get through it. And yeah, that was my first video that I recorded. And then I kept doing sessions with him, and I worked with him for 6 months. And to keep a long story short, in 6 months' time, my life completely transformed. My energy completely transformed. And I lost like 40 kilos. I later on, after that, ended up manifesting a promotion in my job because my brain was functioning a lot better. My energy was higher. And my diet started to change. I started drinking water. I started to eat more healthy foods. Started to stop watching crap on TV and started watching informative things. I started learning about spirituality and all these different concepts. And yeah, I basically, when I worked with this guy for 6 months, we did a lot of subconscious work. We did a lot of meditation. He taught me a lot of things, and he really empowered me to move forward. And from then onwards, I dived into my own self-development and my own deeper spirituality. And that was like the catapult for my journey from there. And from then onwards, like I said, promotions came. I manifested like $200,000 in 1 year. I just felt amazing. So there was lots of transformation. My anxiety pretty much disappeared. My panic attacks went. The vertigo went. Paranoia went. And from then onwards, it was been more of a journey. But that was pretty much the big pinnacle time in my life. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Jacob. That sounds like both a challenging but very beautiful journey at the same time. So I love that. Something I want to touch on is that anxiety, panic attack area, because one thing I've learned is thinking about it or staying in the mind keeps you stuck. It can be a very vicious cycle where anxiety or panic can breed more panic. You panic about, am I going to panic when I go out in the social interaction? If other people see me as anxious, that's very shameful. That means I'm not good enough as a person. I'm a loser. I'm a failure. And those are things I've dealt a lot with as well. And so one thing I've learned is the importance of transcending the mind. So instead of being in the mind, thinking, and really believing in what you are thinking, using meditation as a tool to get out of the mind. Now, you mentioned hypno. That's not something I have any experience with. So I'm really curious about how hypno um, facilitates that, and if there were any other sort of emotional release practices you had to do. And yeah, I'm just really keen to dive into this topic.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Early on in that stage, I was at a certain level of consciousness. So what I required was, to be out of the fight or flight mode and go more into that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest. And, I realized I was operating a lot from that stress response, from that fight or flight. So some of the basics, about just me relaxing and not believing my thoughts at the time, because every time I would go out, I would have those certain thoughts prior to going out. And the suffering was worse in my head than it was in the actual scenario that I was afraid of. And so through experience, because we get so caught up in our head and when we don't even do anything and we're living in our head and we're living out these problems when they're not actually in reality, they're not actually in our present moment. So for me, some of the steps was just to see that my mind was lying to me and that I'm here, I'm safe, it's okay if I'm out in public, it's okay if I'm at the shops, it's okay if I'm at my friend's house, right? And once I really got more into that meditation, that relaxation mind, and that, you know, that state of alignment, there was a lot less thoughts, and I was able to be out more in public. But when I look back on it, I was basically becoming more sensitive at the time to energy, because I was going through some sort of spiritual awakening at the time. So I was picking up on energy outside of me, right? I was picking up energy from other people, and I did not know whether to distinguish that from me at the time. So later on, I realized, okay, what I'm feeling is not always mine. And if I'm feeling some type of anxiety, that could be coming off the person next to me, that could be coming off my friend or someone in the environment. And it's not always me. So that was helpful for me to distinguish, okay, where am I? What am I picking up on? What is this energy? And that created a separation between me identifying with that suffering and that energy, and created a bit of space for me to observe and go, okay, there is an energy that I'm experiencing. There is anxiety that I am experiencing. Anxiety is not who I am. You know, that panic is not who I am. So by creating that space through meditation and through these practices, it allowed me to disidentify from my experience. And, you know, I had to learn to reframe my experiences. And I learned a lot of that through hypnotherapy, where we would dive into an altered state of consciousness. And that when we're in that space, we're more suggestible because we're accessing our subconscious mind. So when we're in that space of the subconscious mind, we can implant new meanings, new suggestions, and we can transform and change past events or certain perspectives as well that we have. And this is what I used to do is reframe and change my perspective about what I was experiencing. And I would welcome it, knowing that what I'm experiencing is a part of my growth. It's a part of my transformation and my journey, and that what I'm experiencing is there to teach me a lesson and trying to help me. But this awareness took time for me to grow in this perspective, because I was just, oh my God, why me? Why am I experiencing this? Why can't I just live a normal life? Why doesn't everyone else have this constant anxiety or these panic attacks or this paranoia? Why do I have to go through this type of thing? So I really did see a lot of that now when I look back as blessings in disguise. Blessings in disguise.
Yeah, there's like a saying that every emotion is there to teach you something. It's there for a reason, you know. And learning the lessons from that emotion, you kind of transcend that up the scale of consciousness. And that's been a big learning for me, is every time now I feel a negative emotion. Before I used to be really like frustrated and mad. I'm like, oh man, it's happened again. Oh, back where I used to be, because I used to have the story of progress that was so heavily attached to how I felt. And so if I was having a slightly worse day, I would beat myself up because I would feel like the spiritual progress has been lost. In the sense that is just part and parcel of more of the same vicious program that, you know, keeps you stuck in a cycle. Um, and funnily enough, just releasing that need to uh, be a certain state allows that state to arise spontaneously and just allows it to unfold and come out. And the emotion has its space to be there. And when it can be there, it can flow by as well, because you aren't resisting the emotion so strongly. And so going into, as you said, identification, what is identification? The way I see it is you are holding on to something. You want some part of you, and that can be for good reasons or bad reasons, but some part of you is holding on to it really tightly.
Mm.
And so letting go of the thing, and no matter how scary it may seem, is what allows you to uh, release that attachment, which then releases the or allows the emotions surrounding that attachment to be released as well.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, the metaphor that comes to me is like, if you're carrying a lot of weight, right? And say you went shopping and you're carrying all the shopping bags. And if you were to keep carrying that with you, right, it's very heavy. But as soon as you put that weight down and you observe it, you stand back from it, it's no longer, it's still heavy, right? But it's no longer heavy on your hands. You're no longer carrying it, right? So this is what a lot of us are doing. We're carrying it around like it's with us. Where if we can just drop it and it's still there, we can observe and go, okay, that is heavy, but I'm not carrying it now. So then there's a lot less of an intensity behind that. Whether we're trying to carry that around with us, we put it down and we go, okay, it's heavy, but now I can look at it and see it more clearly when we drop it.
Mm.
Because while we're carrying it, it's like, oh, this is heavy, this is bad, this is negative. And if let's separate it from us for a moment. Let's put
Yeah,
it down.
definitely. Yeah. And when you can separate it, like the more you can separate it and the more you can release that identification, you kind of see that there was no you that was making that occur or happen. It was just happening, it was just arising. And that you aren't at fault for carrying around that burden. The burden was just there as it unfolded through your life. And then releasing that, you see, um, even the good things are just there. They're just arising. Because once again, not only with negative emotions, but like with positive emotions too, you can get really attached to wanting to feel good, wanting to have a certain level of success. And that all prevents or resists you from experiencing that fully, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from. It's an interesting topic because we resist, we resist the positive emotions just as much as we resist certain negative emotions, which I've seen take play. And from what I realized through my journey is that, I never really experienced true positive emotions, right? It was always a certain temporary stimuli, whether that be from a drug or from a certain food or some experience. And I realized that there were levels above in different paradigms that I never experienced in my life before. And I thought conceptually I had like this idea of what that feeling is like, right? But I never actually experienced it firsthand. And what I uncovered was that these emotions, right, like you said, are coming and going. But then there's a part of our true nature that isn't coming and going, right? As they say, the awareness or the spirit or the soul. And I noticed that there was a certain theme where there was you could say an emotion, but an emotion that wasn't coming or going, an emotion that was always present there, a feeling. This is what I started to kind of observe. And it's interesting because we are a human, right? We're in a physical body, and there's only so much of that true nature that we can experience in the physical body until we basically ascend, right? So this is where I started to really learn about levels of consciousness, levels of vibration, and understanding that, everything in this world is made up of vibration, and even though there is physical objects and we can't pierce through our hand, that if you zoom down a million times, you will see that there is empty space, and it's just all of it is basically vibration. The 99.999% is just empty space of everything we experience. And so that's, it's amazing because everything's energy, right? Everything is energy. And when we vibrate at a higher frequency, we step into a new reality. The world around us literally morphs. And when we're at that low frequency, say we're in that state where we're having a bad day, right? And we're feeling sadness or feeling some type of anger, then we're temporarily in some illusionary world in that moment. We're in an illusion at that frequency. And that while we're in that frequency, we're going to project and perceive the world based on our levels of vibration. And this used to baffle me at work because I would see this changing in my day dramatically. And that was only why it came into my awareness. It's always happening in a fluctuation with people. Our vibration goes up and maybe go down, but we have these, they call them vibrational set points, where we may resonate at mostly. And for me, that was dramatically shifting in my life. And I would experience days where I would be so low, and I would see people at work respond to me in a negative manner. I would have a pain in my knee. My lower back would be sore. The food in the canteen would be dry. It wouldn't taste good. The lighting in the building where I was working would look dull and grey. I would be more reactive to people I'm speaking to, very snappy. And then I would see that same environment, when my vibration would shift and go into a higher state, that the same people would treat me better. Managers will all of a sudden treat me nice. That pain in my knee disappeared. My lower back's pain's gone. The same food at the canteen tastes all of a sudden amazing. It's cooked well. It just tastes better. The environment is lit up. There's this beautiful lighting and a clarity. Then when I speak to people, they're like responding to me positively, and it's like synchronicities happen, magic happens, opportunities happen. And I was amazed by this many years ago, back when I was working in a warehouse. And I thought, this is important. This is very important to master. If we can master our vibration, we can literally master our results in the world and our success. And I seen that, by lifting our frequency in the physical up into a higher vibration, that we were going to get amazing results reflected back in the external world.
Definitely. Yeah. Surprisingly, even a lot of successful business people are operating at a higher level of consciousness than the average person because they need to. And they don't have a spiritual program like we do. They haven't gone through the same unfoldments. Often it's just through different set of circumstances. And they are capped at a certain level because they don't have that spiritual program. They're not actively trying to ascend. But interestingly, a lot of it results in them, for example, starting a business, you have to be very courageous. You have to accept failure again and again and again. You have to be very accepting of yourself because you have to look at all those things that you were afraid of looking at. So you have to be radically honest. You have to be accountable. And so interestingly, even through a different medium, they are, in a sense, achieving the same kind of thing, which I just find fascinating how there are so many different paths and they're filtered through these different experiences, different perspectives, like a fractal almost branching out. And we think they're different, we think that growth is different, and there are differences and nuances to it. But in the sense that there is a similarity, which is this expansion of the self, whether through positive or negative emotions over a long time frame, that's sort of resulting in an expansion of consciousness, if you want to call it that, which I think is just so fascinating to think about.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very.
Have you heard of the whole go sorry?
No, I was just saying, yeah, it's very, very fascinating. And back when I was at work, that's why I was fascinated so much, because I seen when my energy was higher, everything around me just was so much more easier. And like I became more productive at work. I went from working 2 days a week to working full time hours. Plus, I had the energy to do like 4 a.m. starts. Plus, I had the energy to do overtime hours. And because I became so good at my job because of this new energy I was in, and I was just like by operating at an optimal performance, it was just a matter of time before I got opportunities by new managers. And obviously, I was able to conversate with managers too, which not a lot of people could. So I had that confidence to speak to them and to, not put them on a pedestal. And, that just led to, I had so many things. Like I had the canteen at the time, they were giving me free food. I had basically like free lunches and breakfasts as much as I wanted because they just liked my energy. There was managers that gave me opportunities. I got new roles, and it was just crazy what I was experiencing. And I thought, this is what it takes, right, to become someone who's going to be a high achiever. So it's definitely crucial if you're wanting to start your own business, if you're wanting to make more money, you're wanting to attract a relationship, especially of course if you want to improve your health. When you're in that higher vibration, you no longer like resonate with negative things. Like for me, I smoked for over 10 years cigarettes, and it was so easy for me to pretty much quit and just change my identity around that. Losing weight, choosing to eat healthier, all the addictions, the video games. Once my frequency was high, it just became so easy for me to let go of anything that wasn't serving me.
Yeah, for sure. That reminds me a lot of the experiment where they put mouses or rats in a tub, and they could have cocaine, but the healthy rats chose not to. There are other things there too. Um, and then they brought addicted rats into the environment. And over time, I think based on a good environment, the addicted rats stopped taking cocaine because they had all their needs met. I might be wrong on the story. But there's a happy ending to it, basically, which is that the environment can really shape, um, your compulsive need for something, for some substance, or engaging in a behavior that isn't helpful. And as you spoke of with the vibration thing, that is so true. I've noticed that a lot myself, where in the past I would really um, effort and struggle a lot to change my behaviors, to start up new things. I mean, when you think about what are some of the biggest issues people deal with, which is like procrastination, they sign up for a New Year's resolution or goal and they can't stick with it.
Mm.
They can't go to the gym consistently. And so when you can raise your vibration, those things aren't so difficult. There isn't all that effort that's involved. It's almost happening easily, effortlessly, automatically. It's just unfolding.
Yes.
And that was a real shift for me, is like taking your foot off the gas pedal and realizing that you can put things on cruise control. and the car starts to drive itself. Now there is some effort that needs to take place initially to get to that cruise control level, or at least it feels like that, um, because there's a sort of different chain of emotions that help will scale up to higher emotions, the higher vibrations. But sort of realizing the resistance to the task impairs that performance, impairs that vibration from coming out in your best self, has been really key for me. In particular, when starting a new task, when you become a bit more aware, you might notice that there is some resistance or fear to the task. So you feel like, okay, I have to write this essay, for example. And just thinking about it, you might notice some agitation come up, some annoyance, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Oh, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be stressful. And so before you've even started the task, you already have a wall that you are looking at that is in your face that you can't even see, but it's pushing the task away. It's making it difficult to even begin. And then when you begin, negative emotions arise, agitation, maybe some guilt. Oh, I didn't do it in time. It didn't work out properly. Oh, I made mistakes. So perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all subconscious patterns that are running that's preventing you from being your best self, showing up and working well. And so for me, the shift has been cultivating that mindfulness into the resistance um, that's there before I start the task. And if you can clear out that resistance, then you move into the task and it's a lot easier. If you can clear out that energy, if you can shift it, now you can move into the new space and you are working in that space as your true self, as the self that is courageous, accepting, loving, that enjoys the task, that wants to uplift people, that when people send you negative energy, you don't have to fall into that energy, or you can even send loving energy back. And so that really starts to shift, micro shift, little by little by little, everything. It's like moving a pebble, and that moves another pebble. And then that pebble might affect somebody else, which makes their day just a little bit better, which means they aren't so annoyed when they get home to their spouse, which means they might be more kind to their kid, which means that, and this ripple effect sort of moves out, creating a vibration that is better, that is um, higher, I guess you call it that. Yeah.
Yeah. This is something I work with my clients in one-on-one sessions. It's a lot based on working with the subconscious. Like you said, when we have an area of our life that we want to head towards, right, and then we're procrastinating on it, we have self-doubt, we have all these walls that stop us from even taking any steps further. So this is what I help people do, is to address and become aware of the subconscious blocks and see the patterns in people's lives where those blocks have occurred. And then we try and find the core issue where it first stemmed from, and then to release that, to change that, to learn the lessons around that, and transform that negative belief system that we're carrying. Because we may consciously want something, right? Say we consciously want to do a podcast, right? Or consciously want to start up a business. But then subconsciously, we don't, right? Because we may feel that we're going to experience pain from doing that, right? Opening up a business or making more money may mean that we're going to experience some type of pain that we experienced when we were young. So we don't want that occurring again. So we create these unconscious walls that stop us to move forward, to stop us really from experiencing pain. from us even achieving that type of success or getting that result, or speaking truly on a podcast or whatever it may be. So you're 100% right. If you're wanting to move towards something, then that subconscious needs to be addressed, because that's 90% of what controls our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. And if we have a conscious choice to do something, but then 90% of us is pulling us back, that's a lot of resistance. It's like carrying a backpack with you on a journey that's trying to pull you back. So when we clear that and we go, oh my God, okay, it's going to be good for me to move forward now. I actually want to move forward to this goal, right? And I no longer have that weight of the subconscious pulling me back, then it's so much easier to achieve anything, really. And that's, you look at anyone successful, I've spoken to many people who are successful, and the only difference is their belief systems, right? And the way that they have kept pushing forward is that they've constantly cleared and worked with their belief systems to move forward to that next level of whatever their growth is at that time.
Definitely. I totally agree. So I've got one last talking point before we wrap up. I thought we'd talk about intuition and your inner voice. Something I've been thinking about recently as I've become more intuitive. Now I've noticed this inner guiding voice, which might suggest things, which might might suggest things. And often when I followed this inner voice, it's like the universe has started to synchronize, and I've started to notice different signs. Things happen better than if I was just caught up in the mind. And that intuition only really started to come out as I cleared away all my thinking and got out of thought, which trapped me in that ego sort of mind. And so I've found intuition is just something I've been contemplating a lot recently. I'm curious about your perspective and on intuition, if you've had any experiences here, and uh, how you've cultivated it.
Okay. Well, firstly, what came through to share was that, we do live in quite a magical world, and there is answers available for us at all times, right? If we want to ask a question, we can connect with our subconscious instantly. If we want to ask a question, we can connect to our higher self. We can connect to our intuition, whatever, perspective or term you want to use. You can connect to a deity or an angel, a spirit guide. People can connect to Jesus or Buddha. But, when we actually have that belief that we can do it and it's available for us and we can receive that, we can get the information very, very fast just by having that belief that we can. And there's a trust, there's like a faith there that it's going to happen. And obviously, to cultivate that, it's going to take time, right? To cultivate that trust, to cultivate that connection to your intuition is going to require you to trust your intuition, right? The more that you listen to your intuition, the more you connect with that, the more you take action on your intuition, the more that you're going to receive, the more information. Now, of course, if we're living in a busy world, we've got a busy mind, the intuition's going to be a lot harder for us to recognize because there's a lot of noise, right? So that's the art of meditation, is to sit and be still, right? And to quiet the thoughts, to step away from distractions. And once the mind is quiet, once we're away from the world of noise, we can tune in, right? And the intuition is always there. It's not like we're turning the intuition on, but it's like we're hearing the calling because we're silencing the noise, right? And metaphor comes like if you're trying to listen to something, but then someone next door is having a party, right? They're playing pumping music, right? And you're trying to listen to a recording that is metaphorically your intuition. And it's going to be just a little harder. It's there, it's available. But until that music is turned down, it's going to be a lot easier for us to connect to that. And so, once we have a bit more of a quieter mind, quieter in distractions around us, we can check in with that intuition and listen to that. Of course, you could listen to your heart is an example of an intuitive space. Your gut as well can be a space of intuition. Each energy center can be a space of intuition as well. You could connect to different body parts and communicate with your body parts. And so, many ways to connect with that. And for me, it's like intuition is like who you truly are. It's your true nature. And it's not separate from you. This is where people get caught up. Initially, because we're human and we have an ego, we do feel like when we are connecting to our higher self or when we're connecting to our intuition, it's separate. We're asking for guidance. But that intuition is us. It's a higher part of us that knows everything right for us. Right? And it's about checking in with that. And that's what intuition is, checking in with our true nature, checking in with our spirit, disconnecting from the ego, because the ego, not a bad thing, but the ego has certain needs that needs to be met, right? And the ego will try and come over the intuition, say, no, we need this, we need that. This is the choice we need to do. This is the direction we need to take. But the intuition's like a bit different. It's going to be a bit softer. It's going to be a bit more nicer in its approach. And when it speaks to you, it's going to be speaking to you from a higher vibration. And so being in a higher vibration in itself, when we go back to that, is going to help you connect to your intuition naturally, because you're going back to more of yourself. When you're more connected to the ego, when you're more connected to that lower vibration, you're in a lower vibration. So you're going to be more connected to lower vibrational thoughts. You're going to be more connected to your animalistic nature as well, which is going to, want things that are based on a tribal dynamic, right? It's going to be a little disconnected from that true essence that's there and overarching. So, yeah.
I love that. I love how you explained that. It was very beautiful, especially the analogy of turning the volume knob down to clear your mind. I thought that was really cool. And what I've really enjoyed about the conversation today is how clear and succinct you are, explaining some of these concepts that can be confusing for people. And the way you've explained it today has just been really beautiful. So I'm really grateful for you being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you, brother. It's been a pleasure, Dylan.